record on this. All right. Okay. So I am going to save. Hold on. No, we don't want to do that. I'll actually open up a new one. New. This. Okay, we're going to bring you over here. Okay. All right, now I'm ready to take notes when you guys want to talk. So welcome everyone. We have 11 participants. Hi, Maureen, Bruce, Leanne, Karen, Tom, Bob, Ann, Kim, Steph. How are you doing? I'm going to invite everyone to talk as I'm going to go through like little tiny chapters. And to clarify, because I've gotten a number of questions from people about, oh, can we review the plan? And what I've tried to tell people is that we are in the process of drafting the plan. We're still assembling data. This is an opportunity for me to get to you all and to give you kind of a very quick overview of what we've found so far, but it's a sampler pack. So this is a sampler pack of the different concepts and things that we've found. And especially starting today, I'll kind of give you a overview of existing conditions and resources and how our approach, so that I can get some feedback from you. And then we'll do the same thing on January 12th with a focus on infrastructure and partnerships between the towns and DEP. And so Kevin Grindle will be on the call with me, on the workshop call with me at that point. And then on January 17th, we're kind of going to bring our partners together. We've got the Hot River Trail Alliance, and we'll look at our website options and bring that all together for a discussion on the 17th. And then on the 19th, we're going to kind of go over, what the layout's going to kind of like, what the next steps are. And then the recommendations, what I'll do is I'm going to take your comments and suggestions from the 3 different workshops, and I'll compile them into, basically a list of comments and suggestions so that we can kind of go over them. I'll try to distill them down so that we can get a handle on the perspective of the stakeholder committee. And this is, if we were in an in-person setting, which I wouldn't recommend right now because I'm not testing quite negative yet for COVID. I'm just getting over it. But I imagine that we're all having a difficult time trying to meet together with a rampant upsurge in Omicron XBB 1.5. So I'm going to move forward, and let me bring this over here. And so just a recap, some of you have seen this before, and we are now up to 14 participants. And you can, I'll kind of I'll send everybody out a participant list after the workshop. But again, those of you who have just joined, please feel free to comment. I'm going to go section by section, and then there'll be a comments and insights after each section, and I'll give you a few prompt questions at each section. So as a recap, we are looking at, and I'm going to actually turn my camera off so you don't have to look at me. So as a recap, we are looking at the Airline State Park Trail. Now, and we're going to create a master plan out of that. The mission is important to state because there's a lot of perspectives about the trail. A lot of people are keyed into the infrastructure. They're really keyed in. Some people are very keyed into the conservation and preservation aspects. Some people are very keyed into the marketing and how can we leverage. So the mission is to evaluate and recommend the methodologies, but its methodology is to restore state park trails economic significance and value to the 12 towns of the region with a focus on conservation and collaboration. It kind of encapsulates everything that we took away from the first meeting when we all met that first time, and what I've seen successionally over the last couple of years. So the process, we have 27 separate consultants who are supporting me and Connecticut RC&D in contributing to this master plan. And I sent out everyone, and if anybody needs a copy of this, I have a list of our consultants and a list of our stakeholder group. We currently have about 120 people on our stakeholder group for the Airline State Park Trail project. It would probably be a very big meeting if we were doing it in person, and I'd break you out all into tables and like we did at the first meeting. But we're going to suffice with this for the moment. So these 27 separate consultants have been invaluable, but they are still out there collecting data, still getting information together. So it's managing an intake of all the information that these people are bringing in, or these firms and these people. But it's a very dynamic process. It's challenging. The simpler route would have been maybe to hire a professional consulting organization to produce a plan, like a plan of conservation and development. That would probably have been a lot easier and straightforward. But the value is that we are getting a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of people coming in to provide this information to you, which I'm going to show you in the next few slides. So it's just some quick findings to date. You're going to see these in different slides, but based on the SCORP, which is the outdoor, it's a survey of outdoor recreation in the state for Connecticut, utilizations from our economic development consultant, Kevin Hively, and Chris Roberts, who assisted him. There's a potential pool of more than 900,000 trail users for the Airline State Park Trail. Now, I want you to notice the bullet there. There's a difference between users and UConn's counts that came in. UConn did a fabulous user counts for us over almost 2.5-3 years, as well as did some surveys of trail users. But this differs from trail users differs from uses. So those 800,000 that you're seeing there, 805,000 from 2021, that could be like the same person traveling over the trail over the course of 2021, 20 times, or somebody going back and forth. It's not an exact science because you're just using infrared and you're counting the footsteps and the people. You're not counting the users themselves, separate users. So so there's some growth options here, and we'll get into that in another section. The other thing is the importance of adjacent influence areas and partners. I can't emphasize this enough. This is really coming out through this process of developing the plan, that if we just look at the airline trails, state park trail, and the 12 towns, we are missing opportunities for tremendous collaboration and really some impactful regional growth for ecotourism for the towns. And then the next bullet is estimated revenue increases. And this is only factoring the airline trail. I didn't have Kevin look at the influence corridors, but he said that you could have an increase of 2.56 million to towns annually just to their local businesses. And in supporting local businesses that provide amenities to the trails. And there's potential growth there also to opportunities for businesses. So resources to support users need to be expanded and coordinated. We don't have a lot of accommodations in the region. There's just not a lot of accommodations, and that's including Airbnbs, hotels, campgrounds, and motels and bed and breakfasts. And so if we're looking to attract those 900,000 potential users, there is not a lot of accommodation for them to be that stay over the weekend crowd. And so we need to look at the user perspective and build, and this is why it's important not to look at this trail on a town by town basis, but let's look at the region in its entirety. So that'll come out in one of the chapters about accommodations and looking at the region from the user's perspective. And Bruce would talk about this for the East Coast Greenway. You have to look at it from the outside perspective. What are they seeing? Then wayfinding, finding your way around this region and knowing where the trail is. If you happen to get off it to go to a downtown or a village district, how do you get back? or you're on the trail. And I had this my users, informal user surveys when I was going out on the trail over the last few years, was people constantly asking me questions. Where am I? Do you know what's up that way? Am I heading south? Am I heading north? We need more wayfinding signage. And so Quinn and Harry is working on a wayfinding plan, and you're going to learn about that on January 17th. We will go through that. Also probably touch on it this Thursday if Pete's ready. Then we also noted that towns and stakeholders are working independently. And there is a sensitivity that we're trying to respect town autonomy and the town efforts, and all the positive responses and influence that so many of these town commissions and boards and stakeholders and nonprofits and land trusts have with the affinity of their towns. You know, my background is geography. I understand boundaries. I understand boundary affinity. So I'm trying to respect that as we move forward. And in one of the last meetings that I had, it came through, and this is a question I want to ask you when we get to the question and insights. Do we look at it regionally, or do we somehow go town by town? And that's a structure on the layout of this plan. So we'll get to that in a second. So here we go. Next. So again, this is just a recap, evaluating conditions, and these were the goals of the plan. I think you've seen this slide before. So planning, going back to that planning perspective, we have airline trail state park users. We have the airline state park stakeholders. That's everybody on this call, and your users also, I'm sure. And then we have Connecticut DEP as an agency, and the Connecticut DEP Bureau of Outdoor Recreation, who maintains this state park. And under planning perspective, we're trying to look at what are the benefits of the trail to the perspectives, the people who are looking at this. What are their needs? What's the needs analysis? That's our trail count and survey and any other information we can gather. And that conservation resources. There's a lot of people that I've met so far who are very keyed in to the conservation aspects of this trail. And then we have infrastructure and maintenance. This is a hot ticket item. I have to tell you, this is a real hot ticket item. And we're up to 19 participants. So we're going to be going over that on Thursday and talking about maintenance and infrastructure. Our Barton and Lugitis, Kevin Grindle primarily Kevin has been interviewing a lot of the public works directors and town officials about issues having to do with infrastructure and maintenance, and we have some feedback on that. And then coordination to promote and conserve the trail. And conserve the value of the regional aspect of the trail. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the influences in marketing. So trail resource planning, what I'm kind of going to go over is existing conditions and surveys. And I want to make a note out to Stan Malcolm, our Airline State Park Trail resident photographer, who is absolutely amazing. It always cheers me up when I get to go and, look for photos to put into my slideshows or into the plan. And Stan has been so incredibly gracious in offering his photo bank for this project. So we have an inventory of the 12 town trail stakeholders. We have engage the community trail stakeholders toward collective leadership. We've been trying to assess adjacent land use and zoning implications. We've been looking at the economic findings for the region in its entirety in context with both the state of Connecticut and the New England region. And then large scope assessment of conservation resources and connections with an in-depth analysis of 2 focus areas, which I'm going to go into in a second. The connections to town centers and amenities and then land trust trails is also another focus. So we have a number of focuses that we're going to kind of go through. So this is our conservation overview. And don't worry, we're going to get to questions or comments and insights. So the conservation overview, this is a nice map that Chris Roberts, our map maker, did, our assistant planner. It's just a quick snapshot of the natural diversity database from Connecticut DEP. And these are areas that are a high level bird's eye view survey areas of areas that have species of significance that you may want to seek to protect. But it doesn't give you the in-depth view that you might need from, so what you do is you go to DEP, for those who don't know, and you ask for, if you're in a specific area, you ask for a review from DEP to evaluate the exactly what's happening on the ground. So this is just sort of a superficial overview. And so this is our bird's eye view that we're going to be taking a look at on watersheds, natural diversity, with geology, herpetology, historical. You can see the list over here. And then I'm going to jump into, because I want to be mindful of time here, the focus areas, Hebron and Pomfret. So this is the Hebert and Bernstein and Hebron focus area. And the reason we focus in on this area is that, one, we received a request from the town of Hebron to evaluate both of these properties. And when I looked at it, I said, Airline Trail, this is a very significant block of open space continuity and forest continuity. So we're going to do the ERT, the environmental review team. This is a Connecticut RC&D performs environmental review team, natural resource inventories for towns. But we're going to take it and expand it because we want to also look at its impacts with the Airline State Park Trail. So what we found is that we also wanted to look at the Pomfret. Pomfret also has a significant block of conservation areas, as you can see from this map. We have everything from the Audubon property to Mashmucket Brook State Park to Pomfret's Recreation Center to other preserves, and this probably is, and the Airline Trail goes straight through it. The significance of these properties can't be understated, because when you're a trail user and you're going through this 50-mile corridor, natural beauty and scenic views are important, and there are plenty of them along the trail. But when you get to an area like this, there's tremendous opportunity for education and synergy. And what we wanted to know from these deep dives, for instance, for the Pomfret, is what is it that the partners that are surrounding the Airline Trail, what are their concerns, and what are the impacts if we increase the number of users on the trail? What are they most concerned about? So we found that out when we went out and did the ERT on the Pomfret site. So this is just a quick snapshot of one item that we looked at. We looked at many items in the Hebert and Bernstein properties. We looked at the watershed. And so then we brought on one of our consultants, the Connecticut River Coastal Conservation District, and Kelly Starr provided an overview. This is a much longer report in the environmental review team report, but this is just a snapshot of what we're seeing for the importance of watersheds and how they interact with the and watershed management practices on the Airline Trail. And that goes everything, which I'll show you in a second, goes from everything to the water flow, to wildlife preservation, to fisheries. Fisheries are a major economic ecotourism potential, as well as a habitat conservation goal. And forestry and continuity of forest is also important, as well as your downstream uses that rely on fresh and clean drinking water. So the watershed in the Pomfret Conservation Area, we had Jean Pillow, who came up from the Eastern Connecticut Conservation District, who helped us tour and view the sites. And she came up with very specific recommendations on a couple of trails that gave a hint to what we should be looking at if we were looking in that Pomfret area to connect to other properties. So we did this walk up to We Like It ice cream. So your reviews are on the trail, you're coming down the trail and you're like, oh, there's a sign to We Like It ice cream. It's a really hot day. We'd love to go up there. Wow, it's a nice trail up to We Like It ice cream over not too far. What do we need here? So we evaluated what we needed, like maybe some bike racks or this or that or signage. But Jean brought forward a lot of excellent information about the trail itself and how to manage trail construction and maintenance on these outer areas? How if you're going to connect to something off the trail, then how do you manage that so that you're not increasing soil erosion, which can also get into the streams and affect uses downstream and wildlife downstream? So that's just a hint of what was happening in the Pomfret focus area. And then, for instance, wildlife in the Hebron-Hibbert-Bernstein area. This is a map of the American woodcock and New England cottontail focus areas. We had Ann Kilpatrick and Brian Hess from Connecticut DEEP, the wildlife biologists. And they provided some excellent insights into wildlife for the Hebron-Hibbert-Bernstein Preserve. And how does it impact the neighboring the state forest or the state parks nearby, and why is forest continuity and protection and wildlife habitat protection important in these areas? So what this helps inform us is it helps inform us of the concept of maybe if you have an open space parcel next to the airline trail and it's an area of critical species, maybe we don't want to construct trails into that property. Maybe you want to leave it a bit sacrosanct and leave it intact, or do some sort of limited access educational support for that property. So there's different opportunities, but we're trying to highlight those in this plan. The same thing would hold true in Pomfret. I mean, the Audubon, for instance, the Audubon property can be accessed from the Airline State Park Trail, although there's discussion about how to mitigate that, because they are a specific conservation area. They don't want to have dogs on the property, or they don't want to have bikes running on their trails because it impacts the habitat. They're very habitat focused, reasonably so. That's their mission. So here's my questions for you. What are the single most important conservation resources on the trail? And I'm going to take notes besides recording this, but I can come back and also, look through the recording to get notes. And are there concerns about ecotourism impacts to natural resources on the trail? So what I'd like to do is open it up for questions and comments and insights from the workshop participants. Anyone? Don't be shy. There, I'll even put my face up so it's a friendly face.
Hi, Jean. This is Kim Bradley.
Hi, Kim.
How are you? I did see a few notes in there. What I would like to note is it seems like a lot of this review is heavily conservation focused. Were there people looking at kind of constructive balance of recreational opportunities combined with conservation included in this, or was there a separate review focused on a recreational inventory of recreational assets of trail systems or patterns of use that are occurring in the vicinity of the Airline State Park Trail in combination with this?
That's an excellent question, Kim. We are not going to go, because the trail is so expansive, we are not going to, what we wanted to do was a bird's eye view of conservation resources that could be potentially impacted from the trail. The trail, and this has everything to do with erosion from the trail and best management practices on the trail. And we can cover some of that under infrastructure. But probably the recommendation is going to be is that using the focus areas of Pomfret and Hebron, because there is a lot of built out areas of the trail too, like in Portland or in East Hampton or Willimantic. So there's a different paradigm with those areas than there are with Hebron and Pomfret, or up into Thompson or some of the more other Chaplin or Hampton. So what we wanted to do was through through these examples, we wanted to give towns sort of a tickler, or the region stakeholder committee, that this is something that if they have something they're concerned about, that there are resources such as the environmental review team or Connecticut DEP to take a look at focus spots of concern with regard to conservation. I believe that the airline trail has been in existence long enough that there's probably significant enough data to understand, and that's what we're trying to track down, with so far not too much success. Although we do know that flooding and backups and beaver dams do cause tremendous impacts on the trail. So that balance is something that's going to constantly be ongoing, and understanding that balance, so that you're both supporting the trail user and the recreational opportunities, while at the same time not impacting the conservation resources that actually brought them there. Does that kind of answer your question?
A bit. I think that there's a little bit of a concern on my end, especially when thinking about the combination of looking at the economic development potential with this, that it's beneficial to look at some of the patterns of recreation. One consideration to make is, the area of Pomfret, for example. There's been some development of mountain bike trails in the vicinity of the Airline State Park Trail in support by the towns. The towns actually supported this. And there is potential for connection to different resources and economic drivers within the towns. So one concern I had was one of the slides you put up said that a trail may not be suited for biking. Rather than looking only at the conservation aspects of that trail could actually be adjusted in the design and the approach taken, rather than water bars. Honestly, if water bars are on a trail, that usually means that there's some sort of issue with the grade of the trail and so forth. So there are options for adjusting the design of that trail and rerouting that trail to support a use that may be of interest. So I think it's important to understand, when we have these conservation baselines, that there's also ways to think about interest and intended use. And there are strategies that can be taken rather than full avoidance. We definitely want to identify our conservation resources and our points of preservation, but we also have to think the balance as we always are talking about it. So I think that maybe this is a baseline of a plan, but there may be a lot more work to go into it to think about how to find that balance between recreation and conservation. And that was one, concern I had of the mission statement too, that recreation really wasn't noted, when this is one of our most important recreational assets in the state and a connector overall. So I think it's something to just think about.
No, those are excellent points, Kim. And you're on target. So this helps me refine. You're on target with where we're going. So what we're trying to do is find what in the plan is to recognize, and maybe that needs to be spelled out a little more clearly, that this is an existing recreational use area, and like with areas such as Pomfret, if you focus in on that area, which we will, you have multiple different stakeholders adjacent to the trail who all have different perspectives. And that's why I had that perspective of stakeholders, who all have different perspectives on their interaction with the trail. And that's where we were trying to go with this conservation baseline resources. So there's the higher level view of what DEP would see as conservation based planning, and then kind of like the green plan kind of overview. And then there is, how do adjacent property owners and the towns interact with Connecticut DEP and other state conservation stakeholders toward either minimizing or maximizing their intended use of adjacent properties. So it really isn't so much the trail per se, but I've noted this, and maybe I can figure on a way of rewording it so that it's a little clearer, because you're spot on with regard to some of the thoughts and concerns.
I think it's
Gene,
worth.
this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Let's go with Frank. Frank?
Hey, hello, Gene. Thank you for hosting this tonight. My name is Frank Zitkus. I'm from the town of Hebron. I'm sitting in for my wife, Ann, who's on the advocacy committee, and she's not able to attend the meeting. But in any case, you would ask about what we thought was the most important conservation resource on the trail. You know, we did ask for the ERTs in Hebron, and that was being considered because we believe that retaining undisturbed forest cover is critical along the airline trail, we believe in Hebron, because obviously that helps to protect and enhance biodiversity, as well as, of course, as we know, it helps to mitigate the climate change impacts by having the forest grow up to full growth forest status. So, but in Hebron, we're also trying to connect the airline trail to the town center of Hebron through a series of grants, which we're like 2/3 of the way through now. So eventually we'll be able to pull traffic off of the airline trail and send it towards one of our other parks, and from there onto the town center. So I think that's a really important thing to do if towns can do that. I know some towns have that ability already and have that, like East Hampton is in a good spot for that. But one other thing too is that Hebron's Open Space Committee was very concentrated on protecting open space or any vacant land along the airline trail from border to border, from our Lebanon border over towards our Colchester border. So essentially the entire length of the airline trail from both those two borders along in Hebron is protected by either state or town open space, which provides a great visual and natural trek along the airline trail in Hebron. So if other towns might want to look at that and see if they could, obviously try to acquire land along the airline trail to keep it as natural as possible. And there's one other thing too that I just wanted to mention, because I know you were going to talk about maybe maintenance. I'm not sure if it's the time to talk about this or not.
That will be on Thursday.
On Thursday, okay, very good. I'll talk about that at that point.
Okay. And Bruce, take a question from you, and then we'll keep going in the interest of time.
Yeah, just a quick aside on recreational use. There's also a component of alternative transportation in fact, through commutation use. I realize that it's a relatively small portion in this part of the state, but there's a corollary to that as well, which is there are a number of sections. Pomfret keeps getting mentioned, but the Pomfret resurfacing project is going to start soon. That's federal TAP money. Whenever you're using federal money, that means, of course, that you need to abide by the Americans with Disabilities Act, among other things. So there's that component. East Hampton just got a couple $1 million a windfall in the budget to do their boardwalk, which is fantastic news.
Mm-hmm.
But again, federal money, right? So it's one of the things that's incumbent on us is to make sure we understand that that this is that there's an element here of through transportation as well. So I just want to make sure that that's spoken.
Excellent, Bruce. Okay, yeah, I'll bring some of this forward, and then also we can translate that to the infrastructure. Okay, so come on over here. So let's go to implementing across boundaries. The challenge with implementing this master plan or any recommendations of this plan is implementing across boundaries. And so what you're seeing here is we have the CROG region, Capital Region Council of Governments. We have the NECOG, Northeast COG Council of Governments, Connecticut Council of Governments. We have River COG down here is the green. And then we have Southeast Connecticut Council of Governments. The importance, the reason I brought together the COGs is because they are the managers of the transportation planning funds that come through they have a planning process that the funding can come through. And it's specifically focused in terms of larger dollars in Southeast and in Capital Region and in River COG to a little lesser extent. And NECOG is designated as more of a rural area. But there are potential for funding to come through the COGs, and also coordination. And a lot of them are doing work that is complementary. So back to that same thought about stakeholders and perspective of stakeholders, it's important for us to keep an eye on what's happening at the councils of government. Then, as we have our boundaries of our towns, all of our different towns, and then our influence areas. So what we're doing here is looking at for land use consistency. When we're looking at the capital, the COG plans of conservation and development, and the town plans of conservation development, and the state plan of conservation development, because consistency is important for funding. Based on the state's POCD, funding cannot be given out if plans, especially POCDs, at the town level are not consistent with, so a funding agency such as DEP cannot give out funding unless the POCDs are consistent with the state POCD. So what we're trying to do, and Amy Patrone and Chris have been helping me on this, she's a AICP planner, helping go through each of the towns' POCDs and their land use regulations and their zoning to find out different consistencies with regard to the Airline State Park Trail and its neighboring towns. So what we want to do is capture and categorize land use zoning to support the trail. So every town has its different zoning. What we're planning on doing is taking all these different wonderful colors that are representative of different zones in each of the towns and evaluating them. We'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks. Chris, Amy, and I. And then Chris will begin mapping them, and we'll begin categorizing them into impact zones as opposed to zoning districts, but that they, a commercial district may have more impact than an industrial district, or an industrial district, may have a super impact if it has certain. So we're trying to qualify that. And part of that is we started with the land use cover that was produced by Yukon Clear, and it shows basically the Airline Trail. This is the Hartford region, Manchester, Hartford region. The Airline Trail is going through a pretty large swath. There's development there. You'd have to really zoom in, but it's going through it's the reason it's called the Quiet Corner for a reason, but it's going through a fairly green area. And so when we start distilling down this map here, we can begin to see, happens to be Chris worked in East Hampton on the Airline Trail impacts. And we're going to begin looking at zones around the Airline Trail that with certain types of uses might have a deleterious impact on the value of the trail. So that's what we're beginning to try to look at, so that we can, on a town by town basis, we can advise and provide towns with, not necessarily, you're not going to provide recommendations, but say, these are zones that you might want to take a look at. So here's the kind of questions that I'm asking. What's the importance in your perspective of zoning and land use to the trails? Are we on target? How do we get towns, COGs, trail committees, and land trusts to work together? And what is the perspective of the trail user and the regional visitor? And why is that land use important for that? And so we'll do a couple of quick comments and insights if anyone has them. Anybody?
I'd like to, John Bolduc with the Hop River Trail Alliance. One of the things that I've seen in Columbia is a house got built right along the trail. Probably the garage is probably 40 feet from the trail. And I would love to see when a property right on the trail comes for sale, that possibly the town purchase it and then create a 50-foot buffer and donate that to the trail or the state or whatever, and then sell the property from there. Different depending on the property, it just maintains the natural piece of it, and it would be probably minimal amount of cost to do that.
So would you see that this evaluation that we're doing as an important component of the trail planning?
Yep, the zoning part is just key.
Okay.
To
So I
the
guess
long term
corridor of the backs of houses for 50 miles. That's
yeah, and you're not going to do that with small properties and dense areas. but the area where that house got built, it's probably, 200-300 feet from the road. And somehow it got, or maybe even more than that, 500 feet. And it ended up getting built right next to the trail.
Okay, and was this part of a subdivision?
No, it was a single property.
Okay, all right, so
So-
good to know. So there may be opportunities to work with property owners, and sometimes there aren't, but overall, that if there's a collective approach, then maybe there can be some mitigation from that. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Okay, I'll keep going. Thank you, John. Okay, so this is our next aspect of what we've been looking at is that each of the what's happening in each of the towns with regard to the stakeholders. That we have our 118, almost 120 members on our stakeholder group, and it's growing. But what's happening in the individual towns, and how is there an opportunity here to support a stakeholder group, and is it important? So of the 12 towns, 5 have active trail committees. Those are in the red. We have East Hampton, 1, 2, 3, 4. So Portland, East Hampton, Putnam, Lebanon, and Thompson. And then Colchester has a sort of a quasi possible group that's kind of looking over the airline trail, as well as Hebron and Columbia and Chaplin, because they have conservation commissions who kind of keep an eye on things. But then there are towns such as Wyndham and Hampton Pomfret where we weren't able to find, but Maureen verified that for me early on, where we haven't found a trail committee. So are there opportunities to team up? Are there opportunities to coordinate? And what we've found is that there may be some opportunities with other groups. So there's Friends of the Airline Trail North. I think it's a Facebook group. It's fairly informal in some ways, but they have quite a number of followers. I love the Thompson Trails Committee has 875 followers. I think the Friends of Airline Trail North is about 600 and something. I won't go into East Coast Greenway. I know Pats have huge following. And then we have the Hop River Alliance, which I will get into in another slide. This is the SCORP findings of why, going back here, why it's important to collaborate. What Kevin Hively, from Nitty Grit Partners, our economic consultant, is that from the SCORP findings, I already went over some of this, is that it's a statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, that paved multi-use trails are the most important recreational asset, with almost 30% ranking at 1, 2, or 3. It is, Kevin's still working on the final recommendations, but it is coming out that the airline trail has the potential for being one of the single most impactful economic generators for the region, from an economic development and economic growth standpoint. So that goes back to Kim's question of, it's important from a recreational trail for recreation use, and it's, how do you do all the balancing with conservation and other uses, but it is an asset that could grow. And then based on the SCORP utilization estimate statewide, there's a pool of 900, which I mentioned before. And then the clear takeaway is that the more pavement and higher levels of maintenance mean a larger pool of users. Now, this is where it gets difficult, because as many of you know, we have gaps and we have different conditions on the trail. So in order to change things, we somehow have to take these 12 towns along with some of our other airline state park trail groups and band together to have an impact on changing importance to change consistency of use for the recreational trail users, so that they know what to depend on. So any comments or findings or thoughts on any of these findings so far? Are we heading in the right direction? Okay. I'll bring these over here. Okay, so now I'm going to start giving you some real questions. So navigating the 12-town region, what's happening? Where do I get information? Where can I stay? Where can we eat? And I'm going to walk you through this process. So this kind of relates back to the SCORP and economic development findings. So you've got this pool of 900 users, but how do you get them there? So there's different events. I interviewed and had a great conversation with the Tackle the Trail group. And they have a pretty dynamic website that works. It's through the Quinebaug Valley area. They work on it. It's a fundraising tool for them and for scholarships. The Appalachian Mountain Club periodically does airline trail walks and hikes and biking. This is an excerpt from the Tackle the Trail. I loved this excerpt because it is the only place that I have found that is specific to the region, where they tell you what are the area attractions, where can you eat, drink, and be merry, what are local happenings, and where can you rest easy. Really clever, really focused. The only issue is that it's all about Tackle the Trail. It's not about the airline trail. They run on the airline trail, they use the airline trail, but it's a mechanism for promoting the airline trail, and they have a fantastic website. But how do we garner collaboration with these different groups? And then so the Tackle the Trail goes is the northern part of the trail. They go to Willimantic, so from Pomfret Putnam to Willimantic. On their course marathon. So these are some of the websites, and I'm going to share this on our website, by the way, so you have all these connections. And then the Ghost Run is the lower part of the trail, and that happens in the fall. And they don't have quite the same website as Tackle the Trail, but there's a lot going on out there. But how do we get people information on a consistent basis of what's happening? Where do I get information? Where can I stay and what can I eat? This is the public user perspective. That's all great, those other slides, but I still didn't get any answers to my questions. So now I'm going to visit the state. I'm going to go to Connecticut visit. And I had this conversation with a few people from tourism districts. So it takes me 5 hits to get to information about the Airline State Park Trail. This is, so when you look at the tourism district for Connecticut visit, it's all of Eastern Connecticut, everything east of the Connecticut River. That's 1 hit. I have to go to Connecticut visit, then I have to go to the regions, then I come to Mystic Country and Best Day Ever. So this, whoops, sorry, back. So this small map here, it's just this area here, but when you go to the website, that hit number 2, what you're seeing is Mystic. We're not talking about the airline trail. So then I go, okay, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep diving in because I'd really like to see what's happening. I'm trying to be a user of the trail. So I hit number 3. Oh, wow, I found something, but I didn't find it here. I found it in what to do. So then I went to hiking. And so actually there's an extra hit. Then I found Airline State Park Trail. Yay, that's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to hit here and it's going to tell me everything I know about where do I want to eat? What am I going to do? Where can I stay? Et cetera, et cetera. So then I get to hit number 4 and it's like CT visit and gives me a little overview and then it says visit the website. So then I go to hit 5 and we hit 5 and we're at the Connecticut DEEP website for the airline trail. So it becomes the state park, right? And that's where it should be. It's the state park. And we have Connecticut Trail Finder, which provides a lot of information. And there's a lot, but there's probably a few more hits from that side that people have to go to in order to get to understand what it is, where can I eat, where can I go to the bathroom, where can I sleep? And so what are we doing about that? And so Tara Penn up in Thompson has done a tremendous job of over the last couple of years of trying to pull some of the towns together to create these paper easy maps, pocket maps, about this big, that you can put in the back pocket, your back pocket. And it's tremendous collaboration. And each of the towns gets their own map that brags about their individual town. And it tells them, where can you eat? Not necessarily where you can go to the bathroom, but where can you eat? Where can you maybe stay? Where can you sleep? and what are some of the attractions in the town. But it's paper. It's not on a website. You cannot find the information on these easy maps on the website. So what are we doing? We constructed you, or in the middle of constructing you with those easy map information, a website. So there is a 12-town airline state park website, which promotes the trail, promotes the towns, and promotes the experience of the visitor. We got some serious questions going into this, though, because who's going to own it? Who's going to manage it? How is it going to be funded for that management? And will Connecticut Visit endorse and link to it? And how is that mechanism? So those are questions we're going to need to ask and get answered before we finalize this plan. But I would really love to have, if anybody has some comments and insights about this.
Well, I've got a lot of comments and insights about that. I don't even know I'm not even sure where to begin. I will say this. I think if you would like to see a website that does this very effectively, you should look at the Farmington Canal. Let me see. It's fcrtrail.org,
Yep.
which is the Farmington Valley Trails Council and the Farmington Canal Roads Trail Association, which are the two 501c3s that encompass all of the 15 towns of the Farmington Canal Greenway Heritage, Farmington Canal Heritage Trail. Geez, you think I'd know? We've been working on it for 22 years. And I think that will be something of an eye opener. So those organizations are old organizations. They're both 30 years old. And well-heeled. They've got a lot of membership, and they basically control not just the paper mapping, but also the internet mapping, and do a reasonably good job. So that's something to look at for this. I would say a couple of things about the aggregation of materials. There is a paper map outstanding that gets that we get these. I'm talking about the East Coast Greenway now, which essentially isn't the airline trail. It's everything else in Eastern Connecticut. So it's basically the Charter Oak, going all the way out to Willimantic. It's a lovely map. It's well done. It does not have all of this information on it necessarily, because it would just be too much. But so there are bits and pieces of things in this state that are well done. But you bring up an excellent point, which is the Airline State Park Trail, certainly in its totality. And by the way, don't forget, only half of it roughly is East Coast Greenway. Is not done, in fact, and in many cases, the current mapping is Deep's mapping, which was very good, but it's getting pretty old. And so that's a component of this. One of the things that needs to be thought about is the fact that a great deal is going to be done in Eastern Connecticut over the next few years. And if you were to put together a website, you would want to make sure you put together the connectivity aspects as well.
Well, just a quick clarification, Bruce. The website's done.
Yeah.
So it's created. And to your point about having an organization, it would be great to have an organization. When I was talking to somebody from the tourism district, I said, is there somebody that could be a foster organization while we wait to figure out that could take over, at least keeping the website alive on behalf of the 12 towns, while the 12 towns gather their resources to figure out how to best promote themselves through the website and the Airline State Park Trail.
Yeah, and there's some opportunities there, certainly. I can't necessarily speak for the East Coast Greenway, but I have been I think, quite helpful to the Hot River Trail Alliance in their formation efforts. I could certainly do that as well for this group. There are opportunities with organizations that are currently 501c3 organizations that could help as fiduciaries, for instance, because among other things, if this group wanted to raise money, you would have to figure out who would be raising the money, right? I mean, that's a fundamental issue.
Right. What we're finding, here's a finding, is that not all of the 12 towns so far, I put it out to the 12 towns. So far, none of the towns are willing to contribute funding, say $1,000 a year in their budget to maintain the website. Just as simple as that. So, and understandably, the towns, I mean, this will come out in infrastructure, the towns are already contributing quite a bit toward maintenance on the trail. So I think back to the question of who, and we can come back to this actually. I would just wanted to introduce it in the interest of time. I'm realizing we can come back to this because we're going to talk about this again on, I thought I didn't have enough content for tonight. Clearly I do. But we're going to talk again next week on the 17th about just this issue of website marketing and promotion and towns collectively working together. So
yeah, because it's a big, potentially extraordinarily lucrative for the region, but it's a big conversation.
Yeah, it's a big conversation, and also I keep, I will tell you, Bruce, you went from day one when you said look at it from the perspective of the user. That's what I've been just keeping in my head, that I can't look at it. I'm trying to keep looking at this from the perspective of somebody coming in from Colorado who wants to visit the area and they can't find anything, and what opportunities are being lost by the towns to those potential users. So that's what I've been going with.
Yeah, and I would say one more thing, and not to pile on tourism, but tourism has had a very, very odd relationship with not just multi-use trails, but trails and hiking in general across the state. Yeah. I'm convinced they don't understand it, and all I have to do is look at the tourism region. The tourism region is Mystic Seaport. Yeah. Yeah, that's the region. That's it.
It's been that historically.
There's nothing else.
Right.
There's nothing else. The rest of this portion of the state. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
It's always been a challenge in all my other jobs that I've worked in too. It's always been a challenge, but I think there's opportunities and conversations that can be had in the future, and we will just lay it out in the plan. So we'll go from there. So just to want to, and if anybody needs to jump off, you can jump off, and I'll just, but I just want to go through some of these.
Jean, just super quick. I think that website is key, and I will note that it can be considered a publication in terms of what's covered in our Rec Trails grants.
Yeah.
And I know we'll be having a visit from Hop River Trail Alliance later on in this series, but they are doing a phenomenal job and working with the towns to be a fiduciary. Something like these funds to keep up the website can be kind of an easily fundable potential for Rec Trail application. I know we're going to be tight on time frame, but I think it's something important to think about, and I think it's important for the towns to think about helping to support these efforts. Kind of have to come together. So willing to talk about that with you further and with anyone on that point.
No, I'm glad you brought it up, because that was kind of where I was going with, who's the entity? what's the entity that would go for a grant? Because I think there's money available. It's not like there's not money around. So yeah.
All right. So the excellent points. And I actually had somebody give me a tickler on that one. So I kind of knew that might be a recommendation in the plan. So one thing that we also noted in our planning is, so you can see there's a lot of pieces to this plan, is the influence areas. So I mentioned that before. So it's not just the 12 towns, but there are areas that can also overlay and impact the use and the experience of the airline trail. This large red circle is the Last Green Valley. Here is that Pomfret Conservation Area block. Here is another potential conservation block, village center kind of thing in the Hebron area. This block here is Middletown, Portland, and the connection, because this goes to your point that, you know, Sam Gold, Lori Giannotti, myself, and a couple of other people from East Hampton were out at the trail on that gap, and just a group of 4 of us going out on the trail said, let's go for that congressionally directed spending for this project, because it's just, you know, it's a nightmare of a number. It was like the situation there was where, you know, the Army Corps had all of a sudden declared it wetlands, even though it was just drainage off the hill. It was wetlands. And so a project that should have been $100,000 became like $1 million plus. And then Sam Gold, who's a mover and shaker, the executive director down at RiverCog, said, well, let's do this. And he got the application in and got the support letters. And as you said, Bruce, it is funded. So it's a great success story about what can happen when everyone bands together and gets out there and starts working the trail.
Well, you know, there's a corollary to that too, which is that for the first time in the last year, Connecticut DOT has announced that connector trail through Middletown to Cheshire is on their list.
It is, yes.
So that's important for everyone here to know, because that was not the case, you know, a year and a half ago.
Yep.
So yeah, it's remarkable what's gone on in a short period of time. So yeah, stay tuned, as they say.
Yeah, I know, it'll be in the plan. And then this area here is Pat Young and the 8 Mile Wild and Scenic Watershed, the Devil's Hop Yard State Park. And there's a tremendous opportunity, because we always think of the airline trail as biking, but there are tremendous opportunities here for some through hiking down to the Goodwin Trail, which leads over to East Lyme and Eastern Connecticut and Mystic. So there's great connections. And then last but not least is the trunk line, the Southern New England trunk line, and one of the longest trails in Massachusetts that can be connected. That there needs to be additional conversations with our neighbors to the north in Massachusetts about how to share influence, again, from the perspective of the user. And then, of course, this is what Bruce was alluding to, this connection. This is the East Coast Greenway map, but a connection from Middletown, from the airline trail and Portland all the way straight through to the Farmington River Heritage Canal Trail. So that, come on, click. So this is the beautifully rendered condition of the Southern New England Trunk Trail. And then these are final comments and insights, if anybody has some. I'm trying to stay on target. All right, I'm going to ask a question. Are we on the right track? Things doing okay? Any comments, any complaints? And if you have any, please send them along by email, put them in the comment section. You know, I've got a thick skin. I've been a planner for 30 something years. You know, as a planner, you learn to have a thick skin. So nothing's gonna rattle me.
I know, I think you've done a great job, Jean. It's very exciting. All of the work that you've put into this and the ideas that are now organized is just great. I just wanted to say in Pomfret, we are in the process of putting up some wayfaring signs along the trail to let people know what's off the trail. And we've got, you know, we're working side by side with some active recreational areas that are connected to the trail, and then some inactive areas like the Audubon and the Wyndham Lab Trust that don't want, you know, active users on the property. They want more passive use. So we're trying to, in Pomfret, you know, accommodate different kinds of users along the trail. And there, I can't report specifically to you because I don't know all of the details, but I know that there is an effort afoot with the tourism district to identify the Eastern District of Northeastern Quiet Corner, and focus some more tourism and some more tourism dollars up this way. So I think that's a great opportunity as well. And thank you for
That's
this meeting tonight. It's been great.
Okay, so, and let me go over here, come on. So the next workshops are infrastructure, on January 12th, and then collaboration and marketing. And on this, we will, hear some wonderful insights from the our partners on the Hop River Trail Alliance on the 17th. They're doing, I wish we could marry them together. They're doing just tremendous work at organizing themselves and coming up with wayfinding and doing some great planning just on their own. And you know, I think there's a great marriage there that can happen between the two organizations, and the synergy that could happen with the plan that comes out of this project, and then how the Hop River Trail being a catalyst for organizing the 12 towns into a cohesive unit. And then we'll do our collective insights on the 19th. So that's just a quote from Rails to Trails on visioning building. That's what we're doing here. We're vision building. And so that we can deliver on some things and come up with a cohesive strategy. So I hope to see some of you on Thursday. I'm going to be scrambling to get the presentation ready together on Thursday with Kevin. And if you have any comments, please send them along to me. I'm recorded this, so I'll be able to capture some of the comments in the comment section. And thank you very much for your participation and support. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for all your hard work, Jean.
Yep, thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, thank you guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.